It was an ordinary afternoon in the bustling streets of the neighborhood. Mrs. Rosa Garcia, a dignified woman in her early 70s, walked out of her favorite bakery, a small family-owned spot where the scent of fresh bread filled the air. She was on her way home, her hands carefully balancing a brown paper bag with loaves of warm pan dulce. The sun bathed the street in golden light, and for a moment, it seemed like just another peaceful day. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, two police officers approached her. Mrs. Garcia's heart skipped a beat, though she had no reason to fear. She had lived in the same neighborhood for years, and she knew most of the officers by name. But these were strangers, rough around the edges, their expressions stern. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of the officers called out, his voice loud and commanding. He was tall, with a sharp jaw and dark sunglasses that shielded his eyes. "We need to ask you a few questions." Mrs. Garcia stopped in her tracks, surprised by the sudden attention. She looked at him with a calm expression, her brown eyes steady as she adjusted the bag in her hand. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely, her Spanish accented with years of experience in the neighborhood. It wasn't the first time she had been stopped by the police, but she always made sure to stay composed. "We're just doing our job, ma'am," the officer replied, his voice dismissive. "We noticed you seem to be lingering around this area too long. Can I see some identification?" Mrs. Garcia's brow furrowed, her heart beginning to race. "I'm just coming from the bakery. I don't need to show you my ID." The officer's partner, a younger man with a badge that read Rowe, stood nearby, his gaze shifting between his colleague and the elderly woman. He didn't speak at first, but his eyes betrayed a hint of discomfort. Still, he didn't intervene. Instead, his focus stayed on Mrs. Garcia, who was now growing more frustrated. "I don't understand why I'm being harassed. I'm an old woman just trying to buy my bread," she muttered under her breath. Before the situation could escalate, a figure emerged from the crowd, Daniela Garcia, Mrs. Garcia's daughter. Her long black hair swayed behind her as she moved through the street, her eyes scanning the scene until they landed on her mother. She recognized the two officers immediately and felt a surge of unease flood her chest. Daniela was a civil rights lawyer, known for her tireless work defending marginalized people, and she had little tolerance for this kind of behavior. She didn't hesitate. "Mom, is everything okay?" Daniela's voice rang out as she approached, her tone calm but assertive. The officers turned at the sound of her voice, and the officer in charge, the one who had first approached Mrs. Garcia, gave her a cold, dismissive glance. "She's fine, ma'am. Just routine questioning," he said, but his tone was sharp, as if trying to assert control. "Routine questioning?" Daniela's voice grew firmer, and she stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the officer. "You're questioning my mother for no reason at all. I suggest you tell me what this is about, officer, or I'll have to file a formal complaint." The officer's partner, Rowe, looked visibly uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, glancing at his superior, as if unsure of how to proceed. The tension in the air thickened. Daniela, with her legal training, could feel the simmering injustice, and she wasn't about to let this go. "Is this really necessary? Are you accusing my mother of something?" Daniela's words were like daggers. She wasn't afraid to stand her ground. If there was one thing she learned in her career, it was that people in power often relied on intimidation to silence others. She wasn't going to let her mother be silenced. "Ma'am, we're just asking a few questions. There's no need for hostility." The officer snapped back, clearly annoyed by Daniela's interference. Daniela's pulse quickened. She knew how this could go. She'd seen it all before. This was police overreach, harassing the elderly, bullying the vulnerable. And it was happening to her own mother. But she didn't raise her voice. Instead, her words cut like a blade, precise and unwavering. "I don't care about your routine. My mother isn't your target, and you have no right to stop her for no reason. Unless you have a valid suspicion, you should let her go." Now, the officer seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then his demeanor hardened. But before he could respond, a familiar voice interrupted from behind. "Is there a problem here, officers?" Both officers turned in unison to see who had spoken. Daniela's heart sank when she saw who it was. Alex Rowe. The officer who had been quiet throughout the encounter was none other than the son of the man who had once destroyed Daniela's case in a high-profile corruption trial. His father, a powerful businessman, had used his influence to crush her career at a pivotal moment. The weight of the past settled heavily on Daniela's shoulders as she locked eyes with Alex. Alex stood there, his expression unreadable, his gaze flickering between his father's partner and Daniela. He didn't say anything at first, but the tension in the air was palpable. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop, and it was just the two of them. "Alex," Daniela said, her voice cool but steady. "You're a police officer now?" Alex nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "I'm just doing my job," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. The heat of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. For a brief second, it felt as if time had folded in on itself. The anger, the betrayal, the years of unresolved issues, all flooding back. Daniela's anger at his father's actions simmered beneath the surface, but she couldn't let it show now. Not here. Not with her mother watching. "What's going on here?" Alex finally asked, his voice neutral, but the tension between them was evident. "I'm just trying to get my mother home," Daniela said, her voice firm. Alex glanced at his partner, who remained silent. The officer, Rose's superior, gave a small nod. "Fine," he grumbled, stepping back. "This is over." But Daniela knew this was just the beginning. They weren't done, and neither was she. The days following the incident outside the bakery seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. Daniela couldn't shake the image of Alex Rowe, standing there in his police uniform, his eyes avoiding hers. It was as though nothing had changed between them in the years that had passed. And yet, everything had changed. As soon as she returned home, Daniela shut herself in her office. The case of the bakery harassment had already become personal, but seeing Alex again, the son of the man who had ruined her career, the man who had tried to bury the truth, added a layer of complexity she hadn't been prepared for. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She had worked too hard, fought too long, to let this moment slip by. She stared at the stack of papers on her desk, notes from the incident, witness statements, and the preliminary evidence she had gathered about the officers involved. But her mind kept drifting back to Alex. His presence, like a shadow from her past, haunted her thoughts. Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking her train of thought. It was a text from her mother, Rosa. "Are you okay, Hija? I know it wasn't easy with the police today. Don't let them break you." Daniela smiled softly, her mother's words a gentle reminder of the strength she had inherited. She quickly typed back, "I'm fine, Mama. Just thinking." But the truth was, she wasn't fine. How could she be? She had always known that the world was unjust, but now she was tangled in a web of personal history she hadn't expected to find again. It wasn't long before the phone rang again, this time a number she didn't recognize. Daniela hesitated for a moment before answering. "Daniela García," she said, her voice steady. "Miss Garcia," came the response, and she recognized the voice immediately, Alex. I think we need to talk." She gripped the phone tighter, feeling the sudden surge of heat rise in her chest. "Why now?" she asked, her voice colder than she intended. "After all these years, you want to talk?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. "I didn't want things to go down this way. I don't know how to explain it, but I need you to understand something." "What is it, Alex?" "That your father was right to use his influence to crush my case." Daniela's words were sharp, like daggers. She hadn't meant to sound so bitter, but the anger was boiling over, and it was hard to hold back. Alex's voice softened, as though he had expected this. "I'm not my father, Daniela, and I'm not proud of what he did. What happened between us. I know I was wrong, but I've changed, and I want to help you now." Daniela's breath caught in her throat. There it was, that old, familiar ache, the one she had buried so deep she thought it was gone. Her eyes drifted to the photo of her and Alex from their college days, the one they had taken at graduation, their smiles genuine, full of hope. Back then, nothing seemed impossible. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice firm. "You made your choice years ago when you chose your father's side." "I didn't choose his side," Alex shot back. "I was forced to stand by him. But I'm not that person anymore. Daniela, I'm telling you the truth. I want to make things right, even if it means confronting the mess my father made. I've got information about the corruption you've been fighting for years. I can help you take him down." Daniela felt a chill creep over her as she processed his words. Was it possible? Could she trust him? Could someone who had been complicit in her downfall really be on her side now? The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of betrayal. She closed her eyes, imagining all the faces she had fought for, those who had lost their voices in the face of corruption, just like her. They deserve justice. She deserved justice. "I'm listening," she said at last, her voice betraying none of the uncertainty she felt inside. "What do you have?" "I'll meet you tomorrow." I'll bring everything. Just trust me, Daniela." She hung up before he could say anything more, her mind racing. This was bigger than she had ever anticipated. If Alex was telling the truth, then everything she had worked for could finally be within reach. But trusting him, that was a whole different matter. The following morning, Daniela met with her mother for breakfast, though her mind was elsewhere. Rosa noticed her daughter's preoccupation, her furrowed brow, and her silence. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" Rosa asked gently, her voice soothing. Daniela met her mother's gaze, guilt flickering in her eyes. "I have no choice. He says he wants to help." Rosa studied her daughter for a moment, then nodded slowly. "People change, Hija. But it's not just him you have to decide to trust. You have to decide if you can forgive yourself for everything that happened with him." Daniela felt the sting of her mother's words. She hadn't thought of it that way. She had spent so many years blaming Alex, blaming his father, but never once considering how her own choices, her own pride, had played a part in the end of their relationship. "I don't know, Mama," Daniela said quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "It's complicated." Rosa placed a hand on her daughter's. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just remember, justice is not only about fighting for what's right, it's also about understanding the people behind the fight." Daniela nodded, though the words felt heavier than ever. She couldn't deny that her mother's wisdom had always guided her. But this was different. This was personal. Later that afternoon, Daniela stood at the corner of the cafe where she and Alex had agreed to meet. The moment she saw him approaching, her heart skipped a beat. He looked the same, older, of course, with the same dark eyes and wavy hair, but still the Alex she remembered. "Daniela," he said softly, as if uncertain of how to begin. "Let's get this over with," she replied, her voice steady, though her insides were churning. They sat across from each other, and Alex slid a folder across the table. "I've got everything you need. But this isn't just about exposing my father. It's about bringing down the system he built. And I'm in." Daniela opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Her heart raced as she realized just how much Alex knew, how deep the corruption ran. But as her fingers trembled over the papers, she also knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just a case anymore. It was a chance for redemption, maybe for both of them. The cafe was quiet now, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the tables. Daniela sat across from Alex, her fingers tracing the edges of the folder he had given her. The weight of the documents seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. This wasn't just about her mother anymore, or even the police officers at the bakery. This was about Alex, the man who had once been a part of her life in a way she hadn't thought about in years. She looked up at him, the tension between them palpable. The last time they had spoken, they had both been different people. Back then, everything had seemed so simple. They had been young, full of hope, their futures ahead of them, until everything fell apart. "So what exactly are we looking at here?" Daniela asked, her voice steady, but her mind still racing. She hadn't fully processed the information Alex had brought to her yet, but she could already feel the significance of it pressing against her. Alex leaned in, his hands resting on the table as he began to explain. "This is the paperwork my father's company used to bribe local officials, police, politicians, anyone with influence. This," he pointed to a page, "is how he manipulated evidence during your case, Daniela. It's all here." Daniela's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected it for years, but seeing the evidence laid out in front of her made it all real. Her fingers brushed over the papers, the truth more brutal than she had imagined. "I never wanted this for you," Alex continued, his voice soft. "I know what you went through, and I hate that I couldn't do anything back then. But now I can, and I want to make it right." Daniela's eyes met his, and for a moment, the world outside the cafe seemed to disappear. Her anger, her frustration, it all came rushing back, overwhelming her. "Make it right," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're telling me that now, after everything? After you chose your father's side over mine? You let me fight alone, Alex. And now, suddenly, you're making it right? How do you expect me to trust you?" Alex flinched, as if her words had struck him harder than he was prepared for. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I know I failed you. I know I let you down," he said quietly. "But I never stopped thinking about you. And I never stopped hating what my father did to you." The confession hung in the air between them, like a wound that neither of them knew how to heal. Daniela's breath hitched as the old feelings resurfaced, feelings she had buried long ago, too afraid to confront. "I didn't know how to fight back then," Alex continued, his eyes meeting hers with a rawness that shocked her. "I was so caught up in my own guilt. and my father's expectations. But I'm here now, Daniela. I'm ready to help you bring him down. The words should have brought her relief, but instead, they made her heart ache. She remembered the late nights, the endless paperwork, the hollow feeling in her chest as her case collapsed under the weight of her father's influence. She remembered the way Alex had pulled away from her, the way their relationship had fallen apart in the wake of her failed case. I trusted you, Alex, Daniela said, her voice cracking slightly. I thought we had something real. But you were never truly with me. You were always with him. Alex winced, the truth of her words striking him harder than he expected. I never wanted to hurt you, he said softly, his voice breaking. I loved you. But I was scared. Scared of what my father would do. Scared of losing everything. Daniela's heart tightened, and for a moment, the years melted away. She remembered their time in college, the way Alex had made her laugh, the way he had been her support when things got tough. Back then, it had felt like they were invincible, like nothing could tear them apart. But in the end, it had been his fear that tore them apart. His fear of his father's wrath, his fear of losing his place in the world. I hated myself for what I did to you, Alex continued, his eyes filled with regret. But I didn't know how to fight. I was afraid. The pain in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, it was almost too much for Daniela to bear. She closed her eyes, trying to push the memories away, but they kept flooding back. I tried so hard to make everything right, Daniela whispered, her voice trembling. But when you pulled away, when you chose him over me, I couldn't understand it. I thought I wasn't enough. That's what hurt the most. Alex's face softened, and he reached out to her, his hand hovering just above hers. You are enough, Daniela. You always have been. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the years of regret, of love lost, and of wounds that had never fully healed. Daniela's fingers curled into the edge of the table, and for a moment, she considered pulling away. She wanted to keep her distance, to hold on to the anger that had kept her strong for so long. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the answer. I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniela said, her voice small, though the words felt like they carried the weight of everything she had been holding back. But I can't do this alone. I don't have a choice. If you're serious about helping me, then we do this together. But know this, Alex, this is my fight, not yours. And I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. Alex nodded, his expression somber but resolute. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'll fight for you, for your mother, for everything you've lost. You don't have to trust me, Daniela. But I will prove to you that I'm not the man I was. The air between them seemed to shift, the tension easing just slightly. There was a long road ahead, and Daniela knew that. But for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, something that wasn't just anger. It was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make things right. The next few days passed in a blur. Daniela spent her time organizing the documents Alex had given her, slowly piecing together the puzzle of corruption and manipulation that had plagued her case years ago. But every time she tried to focus, her mind would wander back to Alex, his words, his apology, and the flood of memories that she had tried so hard to bury. Despite her lingering doubts, Daniela knew she couldn't let her personal feelings get in the way of what was at stake. Her fight was bigger than her anger at Alex, bigger than the betrayal she felt. The people who had been wronged, her mother, the community, the countless individuals who had been crushed under the weight of corruption, deserved justice. And she would get it, no matter the cost. That morning, Daniela met with a team of trusted colleagues at her law firm. She spread the papers Alex had given her across the table, her brow furrowed in concentration. They went through the documents meticulously, bribes paid to local officials, false evidence submitted to cover up illegal activities, names of key players in her father's network. It was all there. The web Alex's father had woven was vast and tangled, and it wasn't just about the bakery incident anymore. This was about bringing down an empire built on lies and manipulation. This is huge, said one of her colleagues, Jason, a seasoned investigator who had worked with her on previous cases. If this is true, we're talking about a scandal of unprecedented proportions. Daniela nodded, her fingers still tracing the edges of the papers. It's more than just a case, she said, her voice low. This is my chance to make things right. Jason raised an eyebrow. But you know that means going after Alex's father, right? She met his gaze. I know. But I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for everyone who's been hurt by this system. And if Alex's father is involved in all of this, then he has to pay for it. Her resolve was unshakable. She wasn't going to let the past control her. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Daniela sat in her office, waiting for Alex to arrive. She had arranged to meet him at her office to discuss their next steps. She had made up her mind. She would use whatever leverage she had to bring down his father, no matter the cost. But deep inside, she couldn't ignore the nagging question that lingered in her mind. What was Alex's true motivation? Was he really on her side, or was he just trying to redeem himself in her eyes? When the knock on the door came, her heart skipped a beat. She had steeled herself for this moment, but she couldn't help the wave of uncertainty that washed over her. She opened the door, and there he was, Alex, dressed in a dark suit, his eyes weary but determined. "Daniela," he said, his voice gentle. "We need to talk." She stepped aside, allowing him into the room. He looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings. The office felt colder than it usually did, as if the air had thickened with everything left unsaid between them. "Have you had a chance to go through everything?" he asked, his tone cautious. "I've seen enough," Daniela replied, keeping her emotions in check. "This goes far beyond the bakery incident. This is about your father and everything he's built. I'm going to take him down, Alex. I don't care how much power he has. He needs to pay for what he's done." Alex hesitated for a moment before speaking. I know he needs to be held accountable, but I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you to see the bigger picture." Daniela narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Alex leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't know everything. My father's empire isn't just about money and power. It's about control. Control over people's lives. And it goes deeper than you realize." Daniela felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" He paused, his gaze distant. "There's more to this than just the police and the corrupt politicians. There are people who will do anything to protect my father. And they're willing to go to extreme lengths to stop you." A cold knot formed in Daniela's stomach. "What kind of extreme lengths?" Alex looked at her, his face pale. "I'm not just talking about the law. I'm talking about the people he's involved with, criminal organizations, dirty money flowing through underground channels. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a war." The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Daniela's mind raced. She had known the system was broken, but she hadn't realized just how deep it went. And now, Alex was telling her that this wasn't just a fight for justice. It was a fight for survival. "Are you saying you want me to back down?" Daniela asked, her voice sharp. Alex shook his head. "No. I'm telling you that you need to be prepared. My father has connections, powerful ones. He's got people who will stop at nothing to protect him. And you're going to have to face them if you want to take him down." Daniela's mind was spinning. She had fought too hard, come too far to back down now. But Alex's words struck a chord. She had always known that going after powerful people came with consequences, but this was different. This was about something much darker than she had anticipated. "We're in this together," Alex continued, his voice low but resolute. "But we need to be smart. We need to plan every move carefully. One wrong step, and it could all fall apart." Daniela's jaw clenched. She wasn't going to let fear stop her. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. "I'm not backing down," she said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes." Alex nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "I know you will. But just promise me you'll be careful. I can't lose you again, Daniela." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Daniela's heart twisted at the sincerity in his voice. But she couldn't afford to let her emotions dictate her decisions now. The stakes were too high. "I'll be careful," she promised, though she knew in her heart that the road ahead would be anything but easy. The battle for justice had just begun, and the price of winning could be higher than she ever imagined. The quiet hum of the city outside her office window did little to calm Daniela's nerves. She stood in front of the wall that now seemed covered in an ever-growing maze of connections, names, and evidence. Every piece of information she had gathered over the past few days had only confirmed her worst fears. The corruption wasn't just at the surface level. It ran deep into the very fabric of the local political and legal system. And Alex's father was at the center of it all. But as much as she tried to focus on the task at hand, her thoughts kept drifting back to Alex. His words echoed in her mind. "I can't lose you again." He had said it with such raw emotion, and for the first time in years, Daniela felt the weight of his presence more deeply than ever before. She shook her head. No, this wasn't about Alex. This was about justice, about fighting for everything she had lost, and about making sure the same thing didn't happen to anyone else. She couldn't afford to let her heart get in the way. Not now. The door to her office opened, and in stepped Jason, one of her most trusted colleagues. His serious expression told her that something important had happened. "Daniela," Jason said, his voice tight with urgency. "I think you need to see this." He handed her a manila envelope. Daniela's eyes narrowed as she took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside were several photographs, each one darker than the last. The first image was of Alex's father, Thomas Rowe, sitting at a table with several other men, all in expensive suits. Daniela recognized a few of them as high-ranking police officials. But it wasn't the men that made her heart race. It was the black and white photograph tucked in the corner. It showed a building, one she knew well. The same bakery where her mother had been harassed. The same bakery where this entire nightmare had started. "What's this?" Daniela asked, her voice shaky. Jason took a deep breath before answering. "It's the bakery. There's a construction project going on behind the scenes. And it's not just any construction project. It's tied to one of the companies that Thomas Rowe has been laundering money through. I did a little digging. Turns out, they've been buying up properties around the neighborhood, including the bakery, using shell companies. This is how they've been consolidating power in the area." Daniela's pulse quickened as she processed the information. So this was planned? The harassment wasn't just random. It was part of a bigger scheme to drive out local businesses. Jason nodded. "Exactly. They're using intimidation to force people out. And the bakery was just the beginning. The whole neighborhood is in danger." Daniela's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just about the police officers or Alex's father. It was about the entire community, the people who had trusted her to stand up for them. She had to stop them, no matter the cost. Later that evening, Daniela met Alex at a quiet bar, one that had become their unofficial meeting place. They both needed somewhere neutral, somewhere away from the watchful eyes of those who might be listening. Alex sat across from her, his face pale, as though he hadn't slept in days. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know anything," Daniela snapped, the edge in her voice sharper than she intended. "You've been lying to me, Alex. For years, you've known what your father has been doing, and you never said a word. Now you expect me to trust you after everything." Alex's gaze darkened, and he leaned forward. "I've been trying to make it right. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm here now, Daniela. I'm not lying to you anymore. I'm giving you everything I have to take him down." Daniela's breath hitched. "And what exactly does that mean? You're not some knight in shining armor, Alex. You've been complicit in this. Don't think I'm going to forgive you just because you suddenly want to be the good guy." Alex's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to help you. This isn't just about my father anymore. It's about destroying everything he's built, about tearing down a system that's been hurting people for years." Daniela paused, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy fog. She could feel the old anger bubbling up inside her again, the same anger that had propelled her for so long. But there was something else too, something she couldn't quite put into words. A part of her wanted to believe him, to let herself trust him again. But that part was small, buried deep beneath the years of pain. "I'm not here for redemption, Alex," Daniela said, her voice low and steady. "I'm here for justice. And if you're really on my side, then prove it. Let's bring this down." Alex's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of the man she had once known. "I'll prove it, Daniela. I swear." As the night wore on, the two of them strategized, planning their next moves. It was clear that the road ahead would be dangerous. Daniela knew that Alex's father wasn't going to go down without a fight. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope, a hope that, with Alex by her side, she might just be able to bring justice to the community that had been overlooked for far too long. But as the evening came to a close, Daniela couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the story. Something deeper. She didn't trust Alex fully. How could she, after everything that had happened? But the information he had given her, the evidence he had laid out, was real. And that made her question everything. What was Alex's true motivation? Was this all part of a bigger game? Or was he truly trying to make amends for the past? As she left the bar and walked into the cold night air, her mind raced with the questions she had yet to answer. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let her guard down. Not yet. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Daniela stood in front of the courthouse, the weight of everything she had worked for pressing on her chest. She had come this far, fought so many battles, both in the courtroom and in her heart. And now, standing at the precipice of everything, she knew that the moment had finally come. Behind her, Alex stood at a distance, his figure barely visible through the crowd of reporters and spectators. The trial was about to begin. Daniela could feel his presence like a shadow, a constant reminder of the complicated past they shared and the bond they had formed through this fight. She hadn't fully forgiven him, not yet. But she couldn't deny that, without him, this moment would have never come to pass. Together, they had uncovered the truth about her case, about his father, and about the corruption that had seeped into the very foundation of the system they had both trusted. But today was different. Today was the day the system would face the consequences of its actions. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie. Jason, her colleague, approached with a stack of papers in his hands. His face was pale, his expression tense. "Daniela," he said, his voice low, "the defense team just made a move. They're bringing in more witnesses. People who weren't supposed to testify. We need to be prepared." She took a deep breath, her mind racing. This wasn't unexpected. She had known that Thomas Rowe would stop at nothing to protect himself, to keep his empire intact. But this was her fight, and she wouldn't back down now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "We've already exposed enough of their lies. They won't win this." Jason nodded, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "I just want to make sure we're covering all angles. This could turn ugly real quick." She met his gaze, her eyes hard with determination. "It already has." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. The air was thick with the tension of both sides preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of Thomas Rowe, the corrupt system he had built, and everything they had fought for. Daniela stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the defense team whisper among themselves. She knew they were scrambling. They had no idea how far she had come, how much she had learned. No longer was she just the lawyer fighting for a cause. Now, she was a woman fighting for justice, for her family, for her mother, and for all the people who had been silenced by the system. The judge entered the room, and the murmurs died down. The trial had begun. On the other side of the room, Thomas Rowe sat with his smug, indifferent expression, his lawyer by his side. But next to him, Daniela saw someone she hadn't expected: Alex. His eyes locked with hers across the courtroom. There was no smile, no words exchanged, just a silent understanding between them. He had chosen his side, and she had chosen hers. The prosecution called their first witness, a former employee of Rowe's company who had been coerced into silence. As the witness testified about the corruption, the bribes, and the manipulation of evidence, Daniela's heart swelled with a sense of vindication. This was what she had fought for, what her mother had taught her to never give up on. This was justice. But then, the defense team called their first witness, a high-ranking police officer, someone who had been directly involved in the corruption Daniela had uncovered. The man took the stand, his face familiar, his voice cold as he swore to tell the truth. But as he spoke, Daniela's stomach twisted. This was the officer who had questioned her mother at the bakery, the one who had been a part of the systemic intimidation that had haunted their lives. She gripped the edge of the table, her fingers trembling, but she didn't let the emotion show. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was where everything came to a head. As the officer testified, Daniela knew that they needed to take him down. She stood up, her voice commanding as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, I request permission to cross-examine the witness." The judge nodded, and Daniela approached the witness stand. She could feel Alex's eyes on her, but she ignored him. She wasn't here for him. She was here for justice. "Officer," she began, her voice clear and steady, "you claim that you had no knowledge of the bribes being paid to cover up evidence, that you were just following orders. But we both know that's not the truth, don't we?" The officer's face tightened, his eyes darting to his lawyer for support. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his voice wavering slightly. "You don't?" Daniela asked, stepping closer. "Then perhaps you don't remember the day you stopped my mother outside that bakery. You don't remember the intimidation, the way you tried to force her into showing ID for no reason at all." The officer's jaw clenched, and the room went silent. Daniela's words hung in the air, and she could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom on her. "I'm not the one on trial here," the officer said, his voice rising. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Daniela echoed. "Your job was to protect and serve, not to intimidate and harass innocent people. Your actions were part of a bigger system, one that my mother and countless others have suffered under for years. And you can't hide from that anymore." The officer's face flushed red, but he didn't answer. Daniela had struck a chord, and she could see the cracks in his facade. He was a small piece of the puzzle, but he was a crucial one. She turned back to the judge, her heart pounding. "I have the evidence." I have everything I need to prove that Thomas Rowe and his entire network have been manipulating the system for years. This isn't just a case of police overreach. It's about a web of corruption that has destroyed lives. The courtroom was silent, the tension palpable as the judge nodded. I believe we've heard enough for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow. As Daniela walked back to her seat, she felt the weight of everything she had fought for lifting slightly. The pieces were finally falling into place. That evening, as she walked out of the courthouse, Daniela felt a presence beside her. She turned to find Alex walking alongside her. "You did well today," Alex said quietly, his voice low. There was something different in the way he looked at her now, something that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just regret or guilt. It was respect. "I didn't think you'd do it. I didn't think you'd ever come this far." Daniela's eyes met his, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to soften. "It wasn't just me, Alex. You helped too." "I know," he said, his voice tight. "But I need you to know that I'm here now. Whatever happens next, I'm in this with you." Daniela didn't respond immediately. She looked up at the darkening sky, feeling the weight of everything they had uncovered, everything they had fought for. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "I'm not doing this for redemption, Alex," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'm doing this for justice." And for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, justice was finally within reach.